Who are some investors you respect the hell out of, but would never try to emulate? Are there any people who come to mind?
I mean, definitely Buffett and Munger for one, just them in general. Here's kind of the twist on this. I'm not sure there's any investor who I admire that I would try to emulate. And I think the reason that is because I admire them because they have a really unique skill. And by definition, most people, including myself, don't have that skill. Another thing is that a lot of people who are really successful at investing were successful in one era, but maybe not necessarily this era. So you
Yeah.
can really admire what they did and how they thought and the risks that they took in that time. But it would never work today. Benjamin Graham, the great investor who wrote the book, The Intelligent Investor, he's like the godfather of investing. If you tried to put Benjamin Graham's techniques to work today, you would fail so incredibly hard, so miserably. If you were putting together like the actual formulas that he laid out in his book, you would fail miserably. So there's really not anyone that I would really try to emulate. I'm a fairly passive investor. And John Bogle, who started Vanguard, I think is probably the most admirable because it was so selfless what he did. Vanguard, a lot of people don't even know this. Vanguard is owned by the people who own Vanguard Mutual. There's no Vanguard shareholders. There's no profits. There's no dividends that are paid to the owners. Vanguard was made for the benefit of the people who own the ETFs, the people who own the mutual funds. And John Bogle did not make that much money for himself because of that. And you could almost think that like Vanguard's low fees, like the amount that you saved in fees is money that could have gone to John Bogle and John Bogle's estate that didn't. It's like he's like this undercover philanthropist of finance that I really admire just because there's so few other people like that. And I think someone like James Simons, who we mentioned earlier, I think in every field, there's only one person whose claim to fame, whose competitive advantage is I'm smarter than everyone else. In tech for 20 or 30 years, that person was Bill Gates. And I think in finance for the last 20 or 30 years, that person has been James Simons, who's like the only person in the field who can say, if you ask them the question, what is your competitive advantage? They can say, I'm just smarter than everyone else. Only one person can say that, and it's James Simons. So if you look at what Renaissance technology has done and just the results that they've accumulated and the consistency of what they've done, it's like LeBron James times Michael Jordan times Tiger Woods to the power of Michaela Schifrin. It's just like in such a different universe compared to what anyone else has done that it's astounding to watch.
For a fun and fascinating romp through different investing styles and very big personalities, the book More Money Than God by, let's say, Sebastian Mallaby. Am I getting that
Yep,
right? Something
that's right.
is very entertaining. Also, not a whole lot of styles you would want to try to emulate unless that is your sport and you are in there. Any other investors besides Jim Simons come to mind and the names that you've already mentioned who you think are truly exceptional? Now, I will expand investor to mean capital allocator, right? So it could
Yeah.
also be a CEO of a company, but I'll let you pick who you may pick.
There's a value investor named Monish Pabrai, who is not very well known. He's a fairly small investor. He's capped the size of his fund at a fairly low level. So he's not a household name. He's not, like, even within investing circles, not many people know who he is. His returns are incredibly good. And he's just the nicest, wisest, fun to be around guy that I've met in a long time. Like I really look up to him, not just as an investor, but just as a person, just how he's situated his life, what he aspires to be, how he lives his life, as someone who I've really looked up to for a long time. There's someone who lots of listeners will be familiar with, Brent Beshore, who's very active on Twitter as well, is an incredibly successful investor. He won't say that, he will deny that, but he really is. And he too is just one of the nicest, kindest, funniest people who I've met. And most of the time when he and I talk, it's nothing to do about investing. We just talk about life and our kids and our spouses and whatnot. So I think most of the people who I really admire as investors, it's more that I admire just how they've lived their lives and their general life philosophies. And their investing philosophy stems from that. That's true for Buffett as well. Actually, there's an interesting thing about Buffett, which is that it was so easy to admire him and still is. But when the book The Snowball came out, which is a biography written about Buffett by an author named Alice Schroeder, and it came out, I want to say 2009, something like that, it really makes clear the case that Buffett has not lived a perfect life by any means. And in a lot of instances, his family life has been a disaster. I think that's the right word to use. It's kind of rude to say that, but I think it's really true. In some ways, it's good to hear that like everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time in the morning. Everyone is human. Everyone deals with the ups and the downs of living a life, and that he's a human. And also that a lot of the reason that his family life was troubled at times is because he had a singular devotion in life, which was picking the best stocks. And everything else came second to that. Everything from his family on down came second to that, in a way that a lot of people, including myself at one point, said, I want to be Warren Buffett. I want to be the next Warren Buffett. But then you read about what it took to get there. And I'm like, no, I want to stay 10 miles away from that. That's a really important insight to learn, is that a lot of these people who you admire, the reason that you admire them is because they're so successful. And that success that they had enormous costs associated with it that are easy to ignore. And when I look at that, it's like, I can look at pieces of Buffett's life that I admire and pieces of Jim Simon's life that I admire, but I don't want to be them, because that mega success had so many costs attached to it that I want to avoid in my life. That's been a really important observation too for me.